Welcome back to Fireside Chats with the President, but not that kind of president. Today's topic is about getting a good car, which sounds obvious, sounds like what everybody wants. I understand that, but it is a little bit more complicated than people think. And there's a lot that we could talk about here, but I would just say three things. One, every person's situation is different, and getting what means a good car for them is something that ultimately a guide should walk you through. The two other things I would say that I would add on to that are very common misconceptions that we hear a lot that I would say would be a good place to start is that most cars in today's used car market are actually not good. That's for all kinds of reasons. The two biggest things I would say there are that it's very hard to find employees and it's very hard to find parts. And because of those two things, what a lot of dealers are doing is saying, well, we're not even going to inspect the car, we're not going to recondition the car, we're just going to deliver the car as it sits because we really can't get the parts that we need and we can't get the people that we need to work on those cars. So there's way more bad cars out there than you realize. And so the two things that I would recommend thinking through as you start that process is, number one, a car with more miles is not necessarily worse. And I understand the correlation. I understand that everything else held equal, that lower miles is better than higher miles. But what I think people forget is that, say, an 80,000 mile car that's good is a lot better than a 60,000 mile car that's bad. It sounds obvious, but you'd be really surprised how many people don't really realize that. They assume that by definition, a 60,000 mile car is better than an 80,000 mile car, and that's just not the case. As a matter of fact, it's actually not nearly as correlated as people think it is. There's plenty of 80,000 mile good cars, and there's plenty of 60,000 mile bad ones. Secondly, brand is something that comes into this quite a bit. Now again, we have preferences about brand at Mats. You have preferences about brand that you learned when you grew up. You know, Toyota and Honda are generally regarded as the best brands, which they are. However, the simplest way I can say it is a good Ford Focus or a good Chevy Cruze is a heck of a lot better car than a bad Honda Civic or a bad Toyota Corolla. And that happens all the time, where people assume that just because the brand is good or the mileage is good, or even worse, if both are good, meaning, oh yeah, how could I possibly get a bad 60,000 mile Toyota Corolla? Yet they don't realize there's plenty of bad 60,000 mile Toyota Corollas out there that have been abused, and they might be better off getting a 40,000 mile Chevy Cruze that's a really, really good car.